Welcome, listeners, or probably the only listener, Professor Kato, and thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of the Quiet on Set podcast, where I will be taking a nosedive into the harsh working conditions of the film and TV industry and its effects on crew members. I am your host, Danielle Martinez, student at University of Hawaii at Mānoa. This podcast was created for my COM 490 senior thesis class and will hopefully educate you as the listener on the sometimes harmful culture on TV and film production sets. As mentioned last episode, this topic is something I feel is very important to discuss. As someone who started working in the field about 2.5 years ago, I've heard some stories and seen some things that made me worried for the crew members around me. I've also heard stories of crew members sticking up for others, and it made me pay close attention to what the heck is going on set. For this episode, I'll talk about the methods for conducting this research, and I will discuss and analyze the results. So to answer the proposed theory question, a qualitative study was created, and results from similar research studies were analyzed for support. I created the survey on Google Forms and was sent out via a link on Facebook. The survey was shared on the social media platform in a private group, Crew Stories. This Facebook group has a total of 1.5 million group members from across the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, and other countries around the world. The criteria for the survey sent to the private Facebook group was to be a member of the film television production industry. The questions were inspired by a similar survey held for film and television production members in Japan. That survey was conducted by Mitsubishi UFJ Research and Consulting Company Limited and was sent out to 1,050 participants from across all the fields of film and television production in Japan. To analyze results, the survey was held on Google Forms, which provides an Excel spreadsheet and a results summary. To start the survey, a brief summary of why I was asking participants was shared, as well as a trigger warning for sensitive and personal questions ahead. Since some of these questions asked about personal information and medical info, I did not make any questions required and made it known that the participant was not required to answer if they did not want to. Questions asked were to reach a better understanding and obtain some form of data of the feelings of a select number of individuals in this field. Results were supposed to be cut off at 100 responses for easy and quick data analyzation. However, the survey reached 58 participants by the date November 22, 2021. The data produced was compared to existing survey results on a workplace toxicity effects and hazardous working condition effects on laborers from the American Psychological Association. The questions in the survey required additional research to form questions that were being asked in a way that film crew members would understand and relate to. The proper verbiage needed to be used, as well as additional definitions and explanations needed to be provided in case the question came across too vague or broad. In addition to survey results, personal stories provided were analyzed for additional understanding of the different outcomes and effects. After analyzing the results from the survey and comparing them to other surveys and research conducted, it can be determined that systematic and cultural change, the industry contains a high number of individuals who are sleep deprived and overworked while dealing with abusive and unsafe working conditions. These conditions are leading crew members to turn to alcohol, drugs, and some serious caffeine addictions in order to properly function for the next 10-14-hour workday, not including the travel or prep time. The idea that crew members need to grow thick skin in order to maintain their job and livelihood is leading individuals to mental health problems and physical illnesses. 89.7% of my 58 survey participants have reported abusive language and behavior from their above-the-line crew members while on set. The behavior of using belittling or sarcastic remarks, being overly critical of an employee in front of others, cursing out of anger at an employee, and withholding basic employee rights such as breaks and days off are reported to be some of the most common verbal abuse incidents that crew members have experienced themselves or witnessed. There are currently no federal laws to protect workers from verbal abuse in the workplace, which means this behavior is completely legal and can rarely be punishable by law. In larger companies, it's an ethical practice to have a human resources or HR department to handle any violations of company policy or misconduct within the company. Unfortunately, when most of a production is hired through contracts and gig workers, there is not a department to turn to when these misconducts do occur. It's most common for one of the producers on set to handle any complaints. However, the reports given from the survey have shown that some producers or directors will retaliate against the complainant. It's been said that there is unseen politics within the sets that are fueled with egos, alliances, or incompetence that will cause an upper management worker to dismiss the complaint or even fire the worker, simply for questioning a safety concern or decision. Reports of abusive behavior from department heads as well as other crew members have been expressed. Bullying and harassment is not only seen with above-the-line crew, but is also present amongst each other. In this industry, power is distributed from the most consistent positions: producers, directors, director of photography, to department heads, then to those who work under them. Power is usually determined by the position and experience someone possesses. One way to understand why the below-the-line crew stays in this cycle can be looked at through the spiral of silence theory. Spiral of silence is defined by the mass communication theory blog as the following: fear of isolation when the group or public realizes that the individual has a divergent opinion from the status quo. 2. Fear of reprisal or more extreme isolation, in the sense that voicing said opinion might lead to a negative consequence beyond that of mere isolation, such as loss of a job, status, etc. Many of the respondents have expressed concern about speaking out against the work conditions in fear of being replaced, where some were actually replaced or bullied into quitting. The idea that a member of a production needs to stay silent and just accept their situation has caused fear and dissatisfaction in these laborers. The normalization of abuse has led to some walking away from their jobs and the industry altogether. Those who have walked away from an uncomfortable situation were well aware that their career could be halted as soon as they quit. But for some, the decision to walk away proved to have no effect on their job offers and empowered those workers to encourage others to speak up and defend their right to a safe work environment. The IATSE strike that was previously mentioned could have had its biggest strike in the union's 128-year history, which would have included around 60,000 members refusing to work starting on October 18, 2021. The strike was authorized by its union members until better working conditions were accepted by the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, otherwise known as AMPTP. We'll call it AMPTP. The strike was to fight for fair wages, adequate time off, longer turnaround times in between workdays, and sufficient rest periods during their normal 10 to 14-hour workdays. Both parties came to an agreement which ultimately ended the strike. However, many crew members are expressing their concerns on the previously mentioned Facebook group Crew Stories that the agreement is not enough and would not have an effect on necessary systemic change. Other union and non-union members have made their concurrence with the IATSE members known. Although this agreement provides those specific union members with better benefits, there are still no protections for crew members who are not or don't qualify to be a part of the union. Only 19 states have provisions to require meal breaks to employees, but for others, companies are not legally bound to provide a meal break or any other break to employees. 82.8% of the survey participants reported to have gone a full workday, so that's 10 to 14 hours, with no break or had a meal break skipped. Without any contracts to provide protections, livable wages, assurance of a safe working environment, the negligence from those in charge and the exploitation from those who are seen as expendable will ultimately continue until a major paradigm shift happens. I'll stop right there for this episode, and we'll pick up next time on my part 2 of the analysis and discussion. I'll also be mentioning the limitations and my overall conclusion of this research project. Thank you so much for listening to this Quiet on Set podcast. I hope today's episode provided a better understanding of some of the challenges workers face behind the scenes. This has been Danielle Martinez with the Quiet on Set podcast for Associate Professor Kato's COM 490 Senior Thesis class.